Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned to talk about Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. That's right, the cheapest book club around is returning because it's almost February, and that's when the book club comes back in February, in a couple days, actually. Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, where we talk about old books that you can get cheap. All of the books are in the public domain, so you can get them for free on Project Gutenberg, or really cheap in other places. And we read some interesting books last year for the book club. We read The Prisoner of Zenda. We read Gladiator by Philip Wiley. We read some good stuff. And we've got some good stuff lined up this year. I think a lot of it's good anyway. I haven't read all of these books. But they all at least look really interesting. And preparing, we decided we have to prepare for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club this year. And I do have a Discord. Which I'm really bad at, but I do have a Discord where, we can talk about the books as we read them. Yeah, I'll link it down below. It's a thrill ride of adventure and fun. But we were preparing, and it turned out that I do have physical copies of all of these books. You can get them all for free on your e-reader. You can read them that way for nothing. But I do, as it turns out, have physical copies of all these books. So I brought them all out. And let's take a look at them. Let's drum up some business for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. So in February, I wrote them all down. In February, which happens really, really, really soon, we've got Of One Blood by Pauline Hopkins. Of One Blood by Pauline Hopkins, which was originally published in Colored American Magazine. It was serialized from 1902 through 1903. And the edition I have is from the Horror Writers Association. It's the Haunted Library of Horror Classics. The Haunted Library of Horror Classics, which is a pretty good series. This series, the series editors are Eric J. Guignard and Leslie S. Klinger. And Leslie S. Klinger is the guy who edits all of these fantastic annotated editions of books. New annotated Sherlock Holmes and Dracula and H.P. Lovecraft and a bunch of others. He's brilliant, and he is one of the series editors for this series of books. And they publish a lot of cool stuff. Yeah, they also do Vathek by William Beckford, House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson, The Parasite and Other Tales of Terror by Arthur Conan Doyle. They do an edition of The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. So they publish all kinds of cool, old, horrifying books, including this one, which we're going to read in February, Of One Blood by Pauline Hopkins. I don't really know much about this book, but we're going to read it. So this is the first one, which we're going to be reading in February. Not too long. You can read this book. You can get it for nothing. So there you go, Of One Blood. I'm looking forward to reading that book. Now in March, we're going to be reading a really short book. We're going to be reading The 39 Steps. The 39 Steps by John Buchan. And that is a really cool paperback. This is my paperback copy, the only one I've got. But yeah, it's really short. How many pages is this? It's 112 pages long. And I cannot remember when The 39 Steps was written. Does it say anywhere when this was written? Probably not. First published in 1915. So it was published in 1915. So it's an old-timey spy story, I believe. I think that's what this is. I haven't read this book, I don't think. If I read it, it was a long time ago and I don't remember. But I have it right here. This is my physical copy of The 39 Steps, which is coming in March. So that's pretty cool. You should join us for that book. Now, the next book is really cool. It's Captain Blood, which is coming in April. Captain Blood by Raphael Sabatini, the master of the swashbuckler story. And I happen to have the Penguin Classics edition of Captain Blood. So look at that. Walking the plank, the dreaded fate that that sometimes happen to people who, fall victim to pirates. Captain Blood. in the Penguin Classics. I think this is the only Sabatini book that is in the Penguin Classics. I'm pretty sure it is. I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong. I'm occasionally wrong about things. Occasionally. But yeah, Captain Blood. I'm looking forward to this. When I was a little guy, I used to watch this on television all the time. They used to play the Errol Flynn movie. That movie's great. I haven't seen that movie in years. I'm gonna have to watch that again. Let's watch that movie again, Roger. We'll watch it in April when this book is the book for Roger's Cheapo Book Club. This one is going to be a lot of fun. That looks cool. Now in May, just in time for Horror Mayhem, is The Beetle by Richard Marsh. The Beetle by Richard Marsh. Now, I have read this book before. I did a whole video on this book. And the physical copy that I have is this very pretty Penguin English Library Edition. The Penguin English Library Editions, they came out and they're all really fancy pants and pretty. And this one has a bunch of creepy beetles crawling across the cover. And The Beetle was a very popular horror story in Victorian England. It rivaled Dracula in its popularity, but not in its endurance. Dracula, I mean, it's Dracula. No way you can, go up against Dracula if you're just, the Beetle. But it's a pretty interesting book with the kind of a horrific creature in it. And yeah, I'm anxious to read this again. So we're going to do that in May. The Beetle, we're all going to read this book. And then, of course, it's June, and June is June on the Range. It's June on the Range. Well, it's not the greatest booktube event in the world. That's Garbogust, but it's a pretty good booktube event, if I do say so myself. June on the Range, which is dedicated to reading Western fiction. And this is kind of a Western. This is The Mark of Zorro, which is coming in June. The Mark of Zorro, which you can get for free on Project Gutenberg. Under a couple of titles. It was originally The Curse of Capistrano, right? Is that how it was originally published? I think so. Perhaps it will tell me in this, The Curse of Capistrano, which was published in August of 1919 in the All Story Weekly. So there you go. And the edition that I'm reading is this one. This is The Complete Pulp Adventures, Volume 1. The Complete Pulp Adventures, Volume 1. Zorro's awesome. Everybody knows who Zorro is. And there were a lot of Zorro stories, actually. And they were all republished in 6 volumes. This being the first one. And this one doesn't just have the Mark of Zorro in it. That's really cool. Look at that. That's awesome. It also has a couple short stories in it. Zorro Saves a Friend. Zorro Saves a Friend. And Zorro Hunts a Jackal. Zorro hunts a jackal. So he's saving a friend and hunting a jackal. And leaving his mark, the Mark of Zorro. So that's going to be awesome. I look forward to that. Then we get, in July, The Voyage to Arcturus by David Lindsay, which is really, really weird. Now, the edition I have of that is extra fancy pants. It's extra fancy pants. This is really nice. This is, okay, I'm forgetting the name of the publisher. It's very early in the morning. It's Beehive Books. Beehive Books does this one. And this has, this is the one edition I have of the Voyage to Arcturus. Look at that. It has illustrations almost as weird as the story itself. Illustrations by Jim Woodring for Beehive Books. They make really fancy books with really interesting illustrations. Look at that. And so this is a very early science fiction / fantasy novel, which I remember being particularly strange. And so it's appropriate that it has very particularly strange artwork in it, which this does. And so this is how I'm going to read it. because, like I said, this is the only copy that I have, and it's extra fancy. So I'll put it back in its extra fancy case. Beehive Books, they make these extra fancy editions. So there you go. That's the Voyage to Arcturus. That's a weird book that we're reading in July. Then in August, it's The Purple Land by W.H. Hudson, which at one time was considered a classic. It's The Purple Land by William H. Hudson. This is my Cameo Classics edition, which was a line of classics put out by Grosset and Dunlap a long, long time ago, back in the 40s, I think. And this was once quite a popular book, but you very rarely hear about it now. Book Time with Ryan did a couple videos, I think he did a couple of them on The Purple Land. He did at least one, and it was really good. And it made me want to read this book. So here it is in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club for August. And my edition, it's got the cameo on there. They put this plastic on it, I guess, to protect the cameo. But it's a really nice edition. And it has some interesting illustrations in it. In the beginning of the book, it has illustrations of all of the characters. And so that's pretty cool. It's a really nice copy of this book. And yeah, so it's The Purple Land, which was originally published as The Purple Land that England lost, but I think they did some, it was not particularly successful, so it was edited and retitled. And now nobody reads it practically, but we're going to read it for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, The Purple Land that England lost, or just The Purple Land. And that's coming in August. In September, it's time for Little Fuzzy from H. Beam Piper. And I have that in a paperback, which is appropriate for an old science fiction novel. I'm still surprised that Little Fuzzy is in the public domain, but it is. And the edition I have is a combination of Little Fuzzy and its sequel, Fuzzy Sapiens. So I've got the fuzzy papers there, in which is Little Fuzzy. Little Fuzzy, they're these terrifying little creatures. They're terrifying. And here's some dude hanging out with the little fuzzies. So they're kind of like Ewoks. They probably are the inspiration for the Ewoks. Little Fuzzy. So that's what we're reading. That's what we're reading in September. Little Fuzzy by H. Beam Piper. And then in October we've got to read, it's getting into spooky season there, so we got to read something spooky. So we got Sheridan Le Fanu's In a Glass Darkly. And I just have this cheap Wordsworth Classics edition of In a Glass Darkly. It's the only edition I have, I believe. And this is a book of different stories, different novellas, and the most famous one is Carmilla, which is a very influential vampire story. It's got Carmilla, but it got some others in here too. We've got Green Tea, The Familiar, and The Room in the Dragon Volant. So, and then Carmilla. So this is an interesting book that I don't believe many people read anymore. I think if people know anything out of this book, it's Carmilla. And I know that is still read because of its place in literature as a vampire classic. And it was influential in the creation of Dracula. Bram Stoker, of course, read Carmilla. And Sheridan Le Fanu was quite a popular writer of ghost stories. So In a Glass Darkly in October, that's my copy of that. Then in November is the Scarlet Pimpernel, and I just have this Bantam Classics edition of this. I think I have another edition of this somewhere floating around the manor, but this is the one I'm going to be reading it, and it's got this really cool cover. Scarlet Pimpernel by the Baroness, is it Ortsay or Orksey? See, it's a name, I can't pronounce it. And it takes place in 1792 in Paris, and it's a very influential book, this one. It was originally a stage play, I believe, and you know, we've got this main character who has a secret identity and lots of daring do and excitement in this. It had some sequels, if I'm remembering correctly, but this is the one we're going to be reading in November, The Scarlet Pimpernel. I'm looking forward to this. It's a genuine classic, and I have it in this Bantam Classics edition. And then we're finishing out with Herman Melville. Herman Melville's very first book, his very first book, which is Typee, which was very popular. And I only have that in this fancy pants Library of America edition. Library America, they make great books. And this one actually is 3 books by Melville. This is Typee, Omu, and Marty. And I think Library of America publishes all of his fiction, all of Melville's fiction, in 3 volumes. I have them all, and I think that's everything. And it begins with Typee, which, like I said, was very popular. It was based on some of his own experiences that he highly fictionalized, I believe. But it should be an interesting read. It's a book that, you know, is fairly well known, but not too many people read it, I don't think. So we, for the book club, for Roger's Teeple Book Club, we are going to read it. And so those are all the books that I have prepared. Like I said, if you want to join along for any of these books, you don't have to read them all, of course, but if you want to join along with any of them, you can get them for free, or you could find physical copies of most of these books pretty easily. A couple of them you might need to get in print on demand. I think this one might be a little hard to get a physical copy of now, other than a print on demand copy, but it's readily available as an ebook. So there you go. Exciting times, Roger. It's exciting. See how Roger's thrilled. He can't wait. He can't wait. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.